Okay, section 2, methods to determine body composition. There's a lot of different methods that we can use to determine body composition. Some of the techniques are older, some of them are newer techniques, and so there's a bunch, and they all have sources of error. This is, when you are doing a body composition measurement on someone, it really can be challenging because these people get kind of particular. They complain about, last week I was 2% lower when Joe measured my body fat. Now you're measuring me and I'm higher. What's going on? With any technique, there's anywhere from 3 to 5% error. What you need to do is have a goal, a body composition goal, monitor them over time, and use the same standards, use the same techniques, that you used prior, and be consistent with that, and that's going to give you your best results. So find a method and stick with it. And for some people, setting a goal, a percent fat goal, is really motivational for them. So it can be very helpful to do that. So one of the oldest techniques is called underwater weighing. I don't know how many of you guys have done this before, but this is the kind of the older gold standard, and it uses Archimedes' principle of buoyancy. What you do, basically, you're just submerged underwater. So you go under, so you fill this tank up with water, and you've got the scale here to measure your weight in the water. There's a little seat. You can't see it because it's down below, but there's a seat. And you go under the water and you blow all your air out, and we weigh you in the water. And this is not a simple procedure if you've done this before. Usually you do many, many trials, at least 3 to 5, and I've even seen up to 10. If you've got an electronic scale, that makes this a little easier, but with this type of scale, if you look, this is in kilograms, so it's, this is 0, so 1, 2, and you get back around as 3, this will be 4, this will be 5, and so you're trying to count this thing as it's going around, and it's challenging because you tell your client to go underwater and blow your air out and hold it. And this is how scientific we get here. Basically, what we're looking for is for this dial here, the scale, to stabilize for just like a second or two. And then that's our number. That's our weight in the water. So it's not a perfect process, and there's definitely room for error in there. In general, what we're trying to do is we're trying to measure a body density, and we determine that through body volume. The bottom line on all this, and this is, you take their weight, body weight on land, and subtract it from the body weight in the water, and that gives you the volume, and then you measure that, divide that by their body weight on land to get the density, how dense they are. Bottom line is, this, fat floats and muscle sinks. So the people that are heavier in the water are going to have more muscle mass. And then once you get this body density, which is usually this really low number like 1.07328, big long number after the decimal, you put that number into a formula to get your percent body fat. Don't do this technique as much because some of the newer techniques have kind of taken over. Here's another one that's kind of become more the gold standard, kind of the latest gold standards, and that's the DEXA, which is dual energy X-ray absorptiometry. And this is a scan that will do everything. It scans your entire body, tells you, the nice thing about it, it is a passive technique. So you just basically lay there and this thing scans you. But from this, you're able to not only tell, more like the anatomical model, where you're able to tell how much fat you have, how much muscle, how much bone. And that's where you get the image printout of a little person standing with their arms out, and you see the yellow, which is the fat, and you see the red, you see the different colors. But this is very expensive, and you're probably going to be able to do this at a research institution or, a high-level healthcare facility, and it can be quite expensive. Another one of the latest gold standards is called the BOD pod. This is called air plethysmography, is the fancy word for this. It uses air displacement. Similar to the underwater weighing where you use water displacement, this uses air. So you've got this little bubble here. Some of you may have done this before. You've got this little bubble. You close the egg, if you will, and you know how much air is in that egg. And then you open it back up and you get in there, and so we can determine how much you've displaced. And from that, you then can determine an individual's body composition and body fat. These individuals, you can see here, doesn't have a shirt on. Usually you're doing this with maybe some swim trunks and a swim cap or something that's minimal clothes for sure. But the nice thing about it, it's all computerized, and within a matter of minutes, you can get your body fat results. This is one of the ways, probably more practical ways, that you measure body fat and body composition. This is the skin fold measurement. And the way this works is we know that the subcutaneous fat is proportional to a person's overall total percent body fat. And the more the subcutaneous, which is the fat below the skin, right? The more you can pinch, then the greater your overall percent body fat. And there are certain sites, and techniques. There's a 3-site method, a 7-site method. One is not better than the other. The biggest key is that you're using the proper technique and you have a trained technician. So you get the 3 sites. For instance, the 3 sites for males would be the chest, the abdomen, and the thigh. And you do everything on the right side of the body, and there are procedures for this. And then for females, 3-site skin fold would be the triceps, the suprailiac, and the thigh. And again, you sum these numbers, and then you plug those into an equation to get body density, similar to what you did with the hydrostatic weigh-in to get body density. You're estimating it, and then you plug that into a formula to get percent fat. It works really well if you have a trained technician. Another thing to point out about these skin fold calipers, and these skin fold calipers, if you were comparing to some of the other procedures, skin fold calipers are going to cost, $150, $200 maybe. This is the Lang skin fold caliper. A couple things to note here. One is if you look at the units of measure, you may be able to see this in the slide. When we look at body fat and use the skin fold caliper, one of the things to note is that the units of measure are in millimeters, which is really a small number. And so some of your people might get confused and scared when you call out a number like 30 when you're testing one of their sites, their skin fold sites, right? But just make them aware that 30 millimeters is not a whole lot. 30 millimeters is not that much. Another thing you need to make sure that they're familiar with the jaws of the calipers and how those work. People can get a little antsy when you start pointing this caliper at them. So just be aware of that. And then the next method we're going to talk about is bioelectrical impedance. And this is probably now, for me, the most common method that's used. We know that intercellular and extracellular fluids conduct electricity. So basically the way this works is it sends a current, low-level current, through the body. This is an Omron body fat analyzer, handheld device. There are devices where you stand on them with your feet. That works too. And if you've been around long enough, you can remember the devices where you attach the bioelectrical impedance to an arm and a leg. That works too. The principle is the same, where you send a current through the body, and based on that resistance to the current, then that gives you a percent body fat. And the way that works is, if you have more muscle, the muscle cell has more water than the fat cell. And so there's less resistance to the current. So the current flows more readily. If you have more fat, then there's less water and there's more resistance. And this resistance to the current is measured in ohms. Percent body fat is estimated from that resistance and that ohm level. And that's the way that this procedure works. Again, the biggest thing that can affect this bioelectrical impedance measurement for body composition is hydration status. If you just guzzled a bunch of water 30 minutes before you come in, then that's going to make it look like you're leaner than what you really are. And if you're dehydrated, it's going to work just the opposite. It's going to look like you're over fat, and that may not be the case. So you need to come up with procedures, and typically you don't drink a couple hours before you come in, but you do want to make sure that you've had some fluids before you come in to do the testing, just not right before. So those are the main ways that you can measure body composition. And like I said, setting percent fat goals for your clients can be very effective and motivational to helping them achieve their performance goals. Point here is to make sure you pick a technique, you're doing it consistently, you're measuring individuals at the same time of day, using the same technique to get the same, consistent, reliable results. And so with that, we'll wrap this up, and we'll see in section 3 where we start looking at body composition and its relationship to sport performance.